Yes, absolutely. So first off, I want to thank SFU for having me alongside these amazing panelists. And thanks so much to Angela for moderating. So in answer to your question, Angela, it's actually integral that, that there's proper representation at management levels because of two things: their hiring power and because they set the editorial vision and agenda. And what we've seen historically is that, the numbers really bear out. So the last time we saw demographic stats of Canadian newsrooms on a national level was in the mid 2000s. It was research out of Ryerson. And I think the last kind of any study about demographic statistics of newsrooms in Canada, specifically in Toronto, was from like 10 years ago in 2011. So that is a testament to how much we hold our industry accountable. And the stats really show that the vast majority of folks, including among rank and file as well as management, are largely white people. And the problem is, because of the top-down nature of news, they set the editorial agenda, they define what objectivity is. They're the ones who they focus on the communities that they're aware of, right? So there's a ton of other communities that are overlooked given that there is a lack of representation on the management level. And in terms of the hiring, from a hiring perspective, they're the ones who are going out and hiring reporters and hiring other editors who are leading this coverage. So it is really integral that we diversify the upper ranks of Canadian media. That is definitely one of the top priorities when it comes to Canadian journalists of color, when it comes to our calls to action. I also would love to talk a bit about why racial equity is essential for people working at all levels of Canadian media. And I've done a lot of this. I've been doing this work for half my life, this kind of advocacy. And generally speaking, when I provide trainings around diversity and inclusion, I actually have a very specific onboarding process that I do. I talk about the business case of diversity, then I talk about the civic case as it connects to democracy, and then I talk about the moral imperative. As much as I would love for people to just understand respect other people's humanity and understand on a human level why these stories are important, sometimes that falls on deaf ears. So when I talk about the business case, everybody knows over the past decade, Canadian media has been suffering when it comes to hemorrhaging staff, losing resources, losing money. Their financial model is crumbling. Like the advertising model is really not as reliable as it used to be, because Google and Facebook have been cannibalizing a lot of these digital ad dollars. So as a result, the people who are the ones who suffer the most are the rank and file. And because journalists of color are largely at the bottom rungs of the industry, they're the ones who are the first to go. What has been emerging in the industry is a greater focus on membership and subscription business models. And these are significant because the folks that are paying for the news are actually the members of the public. They're not the advertisers. So that actually, the way that this model is successful is, it is only successful if you actually have a level of trust with your community as a media institution. So it's a virtuous cycle. When you serve your community with news that reflects their lived experiences in their daily lives, they're far more likely to pay. So this is actually a very positive development, because this is actually coincides with the rise of audience-driven journalism, because of the fact that there are more outlets relying on subscription, relying on membership to keep their organizations afloat financially. They're going to have to develop positive relationships with these underserved communities. And it's a very positive thing, because I think a lot of news coverage has been largely homogenous from a white lens. And now with the rise of audience segmentation and a focus on audience-driven journalism, a lot more audiences that were historically overlooked will no longer be anymore. I also, sorry, how much time do I have left? I realize.
You have 1 minute.
Okay, great. And very quickly, I also want to talk about the civic case and the importance, the civic case when it comes to the importance of diversity and inclusion, is that there's a lot of research that shows that people who don't have access to local news and news that really reflects their lived experience in their daily lives are less likely to trust their neighbors, they're less likely to engage civically, and they're less likely to vote. So this actually fundamentally impacts our democracy. Like Angela said in her introduction, it's it's a disservice to the entirety of Canada and all Canadians, regardless of their racial background, when you don't cover all communities, because you're not actually providing an accurate portrayal of Canada. And so as a result, it's just, and I also find that when you cover stories from all communities, that actually reduces polarization. You have a greater understanding of folks who might not come from your own community. It engenders empathy, it engenders understanding. So from a basic human perspective, it's just, and for the betterment of our society, it's essential that we cover all sorts of communities and make sure that they're well represented.